The paper in my hand was beige. Not just beige, it was sandstorm ecru, a color that probably cost a branding consultant 50 grand to name, and a color that, coincidentally, matched the siding of every single house on my street. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the kind of specific, white-hot rage that only suburban bureaucracy can induce. I stood in my driveway, the asphalt radiating the humid warmth of a Florida afternoon, staring down at the source of my financial ruin. It was a sign. A small, corrugated plastic square on a flimsy metal wire H-stake. It was faded, sun-bleached, and barely 6 inches tall. It read, in a font that had been funny in 2004 and was now just confusing, "Vote for Pedro." $500, I whispered to the gnome standing next to it. The gnome, whose name was Bartholomew, didn't answer. He just fished. They fined me $500 for a Napoleon Dynamite reference, Bartholomew. I looked back at the letter. Violation of Article 9, Section C, unauthorized signage. It wasn't just a warning. It was a bill. Then I heard it, the sound of silence approaching. It was the hum of tires on pavement, unaccompanied by an engine. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. I knew the aerodynamic profile of that Prius better than I knew the lines on my own palm. Brendan. The Prius crept down the cul-de-sac at exactly 14 miles per hour, 1 mile under the limit, just to prove a point. It slowed as it passed my driveway. The window rolled down with a mechanical whir that sounded like a robot clearing its throat. "Jack!" Brendan called out. His voice was too cheerful. It was the voice of a man who organizes his spice rack alphabetically by Latin name. "Did you get the mail?" I looked at him. He was wearing a polo shirt tucked into khaki shorts. He was wearing boat shoes. We live 300 miles from the nearest boatable body of water. "I got it, Brendan," I said, waving the beige death warrant. $500? Really? Brendan stopped the car completely. He rested his arm on the doorframe. He was smiling, but his eyes were scanning my lawn for weeds. "It's not about the money, Jack. It's about the visual cohesion of Oakwood Heights. We had a board meeting last night. I wasn't invited. It was an emergency session. We voted to ban all signage, political, commercial, humorous, everything." He gestured vaguely at my Pedro sign. "It creates clutter. It lowers property values. If we let you keep that, next thing you know, the Davises are putting up a Black Lives Matter sign, and then the Millers put up a Blue Lives Matter sign, and then old man Jenkins puts up that sign about his lost cat, and suddenly, chaos. We just want neutrality." "Neutrality," I repeated. "Brendan, this sign has been here for 3 years. It has root systems. It is part of the local ecosystem." "Section 4, paragraph C," Brendan recited, as if quoting scripture. "No physical structures, placards, or printed. Materials conveying a message, opinion, or affiliation may be erected on the sod, soil, or exterior cladding of the domicile." "It's ironclad, Jack. Take it down, pay the fine, and let's keep Oakwood beautiful." He didn't wait for a response. The window rolled up. The Prius hummed away, silent as a ninja with a clipboard. I stood there for a long time. I looked at the Pedro sign. I looked at Bartholomew the gnome. "Neutrality," I said again. I walked over to the sign and ripped it out of the ground. A clump of dirt came with it. I marched to the garage, tossed the sign into the recycling bin, and slammed the lid. I don't care about politics. I really don't. I haven't voted in a primary since I was 22. But I care about Brendan. I care deeply, passionately, about the fact that Brendan thinks he owns my eyeballs. I walked into the house, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat down at the kitchen table. I opened the HOA handbook. It was 3 inches thick. "Okay, Brendan," I muttered, cracking the can. "Let's see what else you banned." It took me 4 hours and 6 beers to find it. I was highlighting passages with a yellow marker, looking like a conspiracy theorist trying to decode the secrets of the universe. The bylaws were exhaustive. They covered grass height, 2.5 inches max, mailbox color, matte black only, and even the acceptable decibel level of wind chimes must not exceed 40 dBs in a stiff breeze. But then I saw it. Article 9, Section C. No physical structures or printed materials may be erected. I read it again. Physical structures, printed materials, erected on the sod, soil, or exterior cladding. I sat back in my chair. I looked up at the recessed lighting in my kitchen. Light isn't a structure. Light isn't printed. You can't erect a photon. Light is transient. It is intangible. It is, by definition, not a physical object placed on the lawn. I grabbed my phone. It was 11:15 p.m. I scrolled past Mom and Pizza Hut until I found the entry for Sparky, AV, and sketchy stuff. He picked up on the second ring. "Yo," Sparky said. I heard the distinct sound of a circular saw in the background. "If this is about the raccoon in your attic, I told you, that's extra." "It's not the raccoon, Sparky. I have a job. A big one." "I'm listening. I need lumens. Lots of them." "How many we talking? Home theater? Backyard movie night?" "No," I said, staring at the HOA bylaws. "I need enough lumens to communicate with God, or at least annoy the guy across the street. I need to project an image onto the entire front of my house." The saw stopped. "Jack, are you drunk?" "Legally, no. Philosophically, yes. Can you come over tomorrow?" Sparky arrived at noon the next day in a van that looked like it had survived a tour of duty in a Mad Max film. He was wearing cargo shorts that went past his knees and a t-shirt that said, "I'm with stupid," with an arrow pointing up at his own face. We stood in my driveway. Sparky was holding a device that looked like a bazooka made of black plastic and cooling fins. "This," Sparky said, patting the casing, "is the Zenith ProLight 5000. It's an architectural mapping projector. We use these for concerts, or to project corporate logos onto clouds when CEOs want to feel like Batman." 5,000 lumens? I asked. 5,000 laser lumens, Jack. This isn't a light bulb. It's a coherent beam of pure spite. It generates enough heat to cook a frozen burrito from 30 feet away. If you stand in front of it for too long, you'll get a tan. If you stare into it, you'll see the future. "Perfect," I said. "I want it mounted on the chimney, aimed at the garage door and the second-story siding." Sparky squinted at my house. "You got vinyl siding, Jack." "So?" "So this thing gets hot, and it draws power. If I hook this up to your mains, the dimmers in your kitchen are gonna scream. You run the microwave and this thing at the same time? Pop. Darkness." "I don't need the microwave," I said, handing him a check. "I plan on subsisting entirely on vengeance." Sparky looked at the check. He whistled. "Okay, but you know this is insane, right? Like villain origin story insane." "Just mount the laser, Sparky." We spent the afternoon drilling. Sparky ran conduit along the gutter line, hiding the heavy-duty power cable behind the downspout. We bolted the projector housing to the side of the chimney angling it sharply downward so it covered the entire front facade of my split level. By 6 p.m., my house looked normal, but hidden up there, like a gargoyle made of optics and hatred, was the weapon. "What are you gonna project?" Sparky asked, wiping grease on his shorts as he packed up. I plugged my laptop into the HDMI port we'd run into the living room. "Brendan wants visual neutrality? I'm going to give him visual dominance." "Right," Sparky said, hopping into his van. "Don't call me when the cops come. I have warrants." "You have warrants? By Jack?" I waited until 9:00 p.m. The sun had set hours ago. Oakwood Heights was plunged into its mandated darkness. The streetlights hummed with that sickly orange sodium glow. Every house was dark, save for the flickering blue light of televisions in living rooms. It was quiet. Oppressively quiet. I sat on my front lawn in a folding camping chair. I had a cooler of beer next to me. I had my laptop open on my lap. "Okay, Brendan," I whispered. "Let's test the bylaws." I hit the space bar. Click. The hum was immediate. It wasn't a loud noise, but a deep, thrumming vibration that I could feel in my teeth. The fans on the chimney kicked in, sounding like a drone taking off. And then there was light. It was blinding. Pure, unadulterated white light slammed onto the front of my house. It was so bright I actually flinched. My beige siding wasn't beige anymore. It was the surface of the sun. The grass in front of me lit up in high definition. I could see individual ants panicking. I adjusted the keystoning on the software. The image snapped into focus. I wasn't projecting politics. Not yet. That was for later. Tonight was about malicious compliance. I projected the official Oakwood Heights HOA logo. It was a drawing of a majestic oak tree with the sun rising behind it. Except I had photoshopped it. Subtle changes. The branches of the tree were twisted slightly so they spelled out, "Help me." The sun in the background had a frowny face, and the tagline at the bottom, which usually read "A community of tradition," now read "A community of submission." It was 40 feet wide. It covered the garage. It covered the bedroom windows. It covered the roof. The light spilled out into the street, washing out the street lamps. It cast long, hard shadows down the block. Doors started opening. First, Mrs. Higgins next door. She came out in her bathrobe, squinting against the glare. She looked like she'd just witnessed a nuclear test. "Jack?" she called out, shielding her eyes. "Is your house on fire?" "No, Mrs. Higgins," I shouted back. "Just decorating." Then the Millers. Then the Davises. People were wandering out onto their lawns, drawn like moths to the world's most aggressive porch light. And then, the Prius. I didn't hear it this time, because the fans on the projector were whirring, but I saw the door fly open. Brendan didn't walk. He power-walked. His arms pumped furiously at his sides. He was wearing pajamas that matched his day clothes, khaki on khaki. He marched right up to my driveway, shielding his face from the brilliance of my house. "Jack!" he screamed. "Turn it off! My God, turn it off!" "Evening, Brendan." I took a sip of beer. "Like it? It's the logo, showing community spirit. It's blinding." Brendan pointed a shaking finger at the house. "This is a violation! You have to take that down. It's a sign." "It is not a sign," I said calmly. "Touch it, Brendan." "What?" "Go touch the sign. If you can touch it, I'll take it down." Brendan stared at me, then at the house, He walked up to the garage door and slapped his hand against the siding. His hand passed through the light. The H in "Help Me" projected onto the back of his hand. "See?" I said. "No structure. No printed material. It's ambient lighting. Just very specific ambient lighting." "This is a hazard," Brendan sputtered, his face purple in the harsh white glow. It's disturbing the peace. It's light pollution. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said, leaning back. "I checked the noise ordinance. Light isn't noise, Brendan. You can't hear a photon." "We'll see about that." He fumbled for his phone, the light of my house reflecting off his glasses like he was an anime villain. "You are in so much trouble, Jack. Section 4 is the least of your worries." I smiled. "I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere. The beer is cold." Officer Miller looked like a man who regretted every life choice that had led him to this specific driveway. He was a big guy, with the weary posture of a veteran cop who spent 90% of his time dealing with noise complaints and teenagers loitering at the 7-Eleven. He stepped out of his cruiser, the blue strobes of his light bar completely washed out by the nuclear green glow currently emanating from my split level. I had changed the image. The HOA logo was gone. In its place was a scrolling text wall, like the opening of Star Wars, but vertical. It was the United States Constitution. The font was Comic Sans, size 200. It was currently scrolling through the Third Amendment. "No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house." Officer Miller walked up the driveway, squinting. He stopped next to Brendan, who was practically vibrating with adrenaline. "Officer!" Brendan shouted, pointing at my garage. "Look at this! It's an assault, a visual assault." Miller looked at the house. He watched the text scroll. "Without the consent of the owner." Miller looked at me. I stood up and offered a polite wave. "Evening, officer." "Sir," Miller said, his voice flat. "Can we turn down the sun just a little?" "Is there a law against exterior illumination, officer?" I asked, trying to sound helpful. "There's a law against being a nuisance," Miller said. He walked over to me. "Your neighbor here says you're blinding traffic." "I angled it down," I said, pointing to the chimney. "See? The beam terminates at the rhododendrons. No light spills onto the public roadway. It's strictly contained within my property lines." Miller looked at the road. It was true. The street was dark. My yard was noon in the Sahara, but the street was dark. "It's a sign," Brendan interjected, hopping up and down. "He's projecting text. That's a sign." "Officer," I said, "the HOA bylaws prohibit physical structures and printed materials. This is neither. This is simply art. I'm an artist. This is my medium. Light." Miller rubbed his face. He looked at Brendan. "Sir, is the image obscene?" "It's the Constitution," Brendan yelled. "In Comic Sans. It's offensive to good taste." "But is it pornographic?" Miller asked. "Is it threatening violence?" "He's threatening my sanity," Miller sighed. He turned back to me. "Look, buddy, it's bright. It's annoying. Why are you doing this?" "They fined me $500 for a garden gnome sign," I said. "I'm just expressing my patriotism. Is that a crime?" Miller looked back at the house. The scroll had reached the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons. The ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of Miller's mouth. He stifled it quickly. "Dispatch," Miller said into his radio. "Yeah, show me 10-8. No crime committed. It's a civil dispute." "What?" Brendan shrieked. "You can't leave! Arrest him! Taser him! Shoot the projector!" "Sir," Miller said to Brendan, his voice dropping an octave, "if you want to sue him, sue him. But unless he starts projecting porn on your garage door, There's nothing I can do. It's not noise. It's not a hazard to navigation. It's just bright. Miller turned to me. If I get a call that a plane tried to land on your roof, I'm coming back with a warrant. Understood, officer, I said. Would you like a beer or a donut? I feel like I should offer you a donut, but that's a stereotype. Just keep it on your property, Miller grunted. He walked back to his car. Brendan stood there, mouth agape, bathed in the glow of the Bill of Rights. You haven't won, Jack, he hissed. This isn't over. I'm calling the city code enforcement tomorrow. Good night, Brendan, I said. As he stormed off across the street to his dark, sad little house, I sat back down at my laptop. Okay, I said to myself. The Constitution was a nice warm-up, but let's see how they feel about aquatic mammals. I typed a new query into Google Images. Manatee wearing a top hat. I hit project. My entire house became a sea cow in formal wear. Your move, Brendan, I whispered. Once I realized the police weren't going to stop me, the nature of the project changed. It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about education. I spent the next week curating a playlist of opinions that I felt the neighborhood desperately needed to hear. Since actual politics were too depressing, I decided to politicize things that had no business being political. On Monday, I projected a 60-foot image of a pineapple pizza with the text, "It belongs. Cope." On Tuesday, I projected a pie chart breaking down the ratio of air to chip in a standard bag of Lay's. The slice for air was colored neon magenta and took up 80% of my roof. On Wednesday, I simply projected the words, "Birds aren't real. They charge on power lines." The neighborhood reaction was immediate and divisive. Oakwood Heights fractured into two distinct tribes. First, you had the pro-Lumen faction. These were mostly the dads who were bored of their own lives and the teenagers who thought I was a meme lord. They started gathering on the sidewalk across the street around 8:45 p.m., setting up lawn chairs and bringing coolers. It became an event. "What's Jack gonna say tonight?" they'd ask, cracking open beers. Then you had the Dark Sky Coalition, led, naturally, by Brendan. They didn't bring coolers. They brought light meters. They walked up and down the street wearing sleep masks on their foreheads like militant slumber party attendees. They started a petition. They wrote letters to the editor of the local paper, which were printed under the headline, "Suburban Man Holds Son Hostage." But the real problem wasn't the neighbors. It was the physics. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I smelled it. That distinct, acrid scent of hot plastic. I ran outside. Sparky was already there. I hadn't called him, but he had a sixth sense for when his installations were about to become structural hazards. He was standing in the bushes, staring up at my chimney. "Jack," he said, not looking at me, "your house is sweating." "Houses don't sweat, Sparky." "Look at the siding." I looked. He was right. The vinyl siding directly under the projector wasn't just warm. It was weeping. The beige panels had softened and were starting to droop like a surrealist painting. A slow, synthetic tear rolled down the side of my garage. "The thermal output is too high," Sparky said, pulling a thermal camera out of his cargo shorts. "You're pushing 5,000 lumens for 6 hours a night. You're basically microwaving your insulation. If we don't cool this down, your house is going to look like a melted candle by Friday." "Fix it," I said. "I can install a liquid cooling loop," Sparky said, his eyes gleaming. Run it from your garden hose, up the downspout, through a radiator block on the laser, and discharge it into the flower beds. Do it. It's gonna look ugly, industrial. Sparky, I am currently projecting a manifesto about why the Star Wars prequels are misunderstood masterpieces. I passed ugly 3 exits ago. By the next night, my chimney looked like a cyborg. Copper pipes snaked up the brick, hissing with water pressure. The laser ran cooler. The beam got brighter. And Brendan got desperate. I should have respected Brendan more. I underestimated his capacity for pettiness. I thought he was just a rule follower, but you don't become HOA president without a certain tactical brilliance. It happened on a Friday. I had just fired up the projector. The evening's selection was a high-contrast image of a ferret with the text, "Legalize him." I went inside to grab a drink. When I came back into the living room, I dropped my glass. My living room was glowing, not the soft glow of a lamp. I mean, glowing like the inside of a nuclear reactor. A beam of intense, green light was blasting through my front bay window, hitting the back wall, and illuminating my entire first floor in a harsh, monochromatic, verdant haze. I ran to the window. Across the street, in Brendan's driveway, stood a structure. He had erected a scaffold, and mounted on that scaffold was a sheet of polished aluminum, 8 feet by 4 feet. It was angled perfectly. He was catching the spillover light from my projector, the light that bounced off my garage door, and reflecting it straight back into my face. I saw Brendan standing next to his mirror weapon. He was wearing sunglasses. He saw me in the window. He waved. It was a declaration of war. For the next 3 nights, life became an optical nightmare. If I turned on the laser, my living room became uninhabitable. I tried to watch TV, wearing Ray-Bans. I tried to eat dinner, but the green light made my spaghetti look like alien entrails. "Jack," Sarah said. She was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. She was wearing sunglasses. It was 8:00 p.m. "Jack, I can't do this." "We have to hold the line, Sarah," I said, shielding my eyes as I chopped vegetables. "He's trying to break us. If we turn off the laser, he wins. The tyranny of the beige siding wins." "I can't sleep," she said. "Our bedroom is flashing. Last night you projected a GIF of a dancing banana. Do you know what it's like to try and sleep while a 40-foot banana strobes against your eyelids?" "It's a classic internet meme, Sarah. It's culture. It's a seizures hazard." She ripped off the sunglasses. "You have to stop. The neighbors hate us. The cat is hiding in the dryer. Brendan is literally reflecting our own hubris back at us. Just pay the $500. "It's not about the money." I slammed the knife down. "It's about the principle. He put up a mirror? Fine. I'll aim higher. I'll aim where he can't reflect." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Jack, what does that mean?" "I'm calling Sparky." No more Sparky. "I'm going to the clouds, Sarah." The weather forecast called for low cloud cover, a thick, heavy blanket of stratus clouds hovering just 2,000 feet above Oakwood Heights. It was the perfect canvas. Sparky was hesitant. "Jack, the Zenith 5000 is rated for buildings. To hit cloud base with legible text, we need to override the safety limiters. We need to overclock the diodes." "Will it explode?" "Eventually, yes. But for about 5 minutes, you'll have a beam visible from space. Or at least from the highway. 5 minutes is all I need." I waited until 10:00 p.m. The pro-Lumen crowd was gathered. The Dark Sky Coalition was patrolling. Brendan was standing by his mirror, polishing it with a chamois cloth, ready to deflect my attack. But I wasn't aiming at the garage. I walked out onto the front lawn. I had the control laptop strapped to my chest like a mobile command center. "Ladies and gentlemen," I shouted. The crowd quieted down. "Tonight we transcend the HOA. Tonight we speak to the heavens." Brendan looked confused. He adjusted his mirror. "You can't project on the sky, Jack. The sky it's common property." "Not anymore, Brendan." I hit enter. The cooling system on the chimney screamed. It didn't hum. It screamed. A high-pitched mechanical whine that sounded like a jet engine spooling up. Water hissed as it boiled instantly in the cooling loop. Steam shot out of my downspout. And then, the beam fired. It didn't hit the house. It shot straight up, a pillar of pure, coherent light cutting through the humid Florida air. It looked like the beacon from the Luxor in Vegas, if the Luxor was angry. It hit the clouds. And it worked. There, 2,000 feet above the suburbs, written in letters the size of football fields, was the message. I had kept it simple. I had kept it personal. Brendan eats pizza with a fork. The crowd gasped. Then they cheered. It was magnificent. The light scattered in the clouds, creating a ghostly, ethereal billboard that hung over the entire neighborhood. Brendan looked up. His mouth fell open. The reflection from the clouds illuminated his face. He saw the accusation written in the sky. "I do not!" he screamed at the heavens. "That is libel." "It's beautiful." Sparky wiped a tear from his eye. "It's the stupidest thing I've ever done." Then the smell of ozone hit us. The whine from the chimney changed pitch. It went from a scream to a death rattle. "She's running too hot," Sparky yelled over the noise. "The voltage regulators are melting." "Hold it," I yelled. "Just 10 more seconds." The beam flickered. It turned from white to a terrifying shade of violet. And then, pop. It wasn't a small pop. It was the sound of a shotgun going off inside a metal trash can. A shower of sparks erupted from the side of my chimney. The projector didn't just fail, it committed suicide. But it didn't go alone. The surge traveled back down the line. I heard the distinct crack, crack, crack of breakers tripping. First, my house went dark. Then Mrs. Higgins's house. Then the streetlights. Then Brendan's house. A wave of darkness rolled down the cul-de-sac as the transformer at the end of the block decided it had had enough of my nonsense and blew itself to kingdom come. A blue fireball lit up the end of the street, and then nothing. Complete, total, absolute darkness. The silence was heavy. The fans had stopped. The cheering had stopped. And then, out of the pitch black, a single voice cut through the night. "I knew it!" Brendan screamed. "I knew you would kill the grid!" We sat in the dark for 6 hours. Officer Miller showed up around midnight to direct traffic, since the stoplights were out. He didn't even come to my door. He just parked his cruiser in front of my driveway, turned on his lights, and sat there eating a sandwich. It was a silent reprimand. The power came back on at 4:00 a.m. By 8:00 a.m., I had a summons from the city. Not the HOA, the actual city. They were using words like public nuisance, aviation hazard, and gross negligence. By 9:00 a.m., Brendan was at my door. He looked tired. He wasn't smug. He just looked like a man who had stared into the abyss of a cloud-based insult and blinked. "Jack," he said. "Brendan. The power company says the transformer replacement will cost $10,000. I heard. The city is threatening to sue the HOA for failing to control its residents. I assumed. He sighed. He looked at my chimney, where the melted remains of the Zenith 5000 hung like a dead spider. Here is the deal, Brendan said. He pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. I have spoken to the board. We are willing to amend Article 9, Section C. I perked up. Go on. We will allow signage, he said, pained. Garden signs, no larger than 12 by 12 inches, non-illuminated, 1 per household. Even political signs? Even political signs, he shuddered. Provided you decommission the laser, and never, ever try to communicate with the atmosphere again. I looked at the charred remains of my projector. I looked at Sparky's van, which was currently towing away the cooling equipment. I looked at Sarah, who was packing a bag to go stay at her mother's until the house stopped smelling like burnt ozone. Deal, I said. 2 weeks later. I was standing in the driveway. The siding was still warped, but I called it texture. I was holding a small, corrugated plastic sign. I walked over to the patch of dirt where the Pedro sign used to be. I pushed the wire stakes into the ground. Bartholomew the gnome watched me approvingly. The sign didn't say, "Vote for Pedro." It didn't say, "Save the whales." It simply said, "For sale. Zenith ProLight 5000, slightly charred. $500. A Prius rolled up. It stopped. The window came down. Brendan looked at the sign. He looked at me. Is that the laser? He asked. It is, I said. Needs a new diode array, but the casing is solid. And you're selling it? Yep. Need to pay a fine. Brendan stared at the sign. He looked at his own house across the street. He looked at the mirror scaffold, which he hadn't taken down yet. I saw a gear turn in his head. I saw the realization that the power to annoy was the only true power in the suburbs. 500? Brendan asked. Firm. Brendan reached for his wallet. I'll take it. Brendan, I grinned. What do you need a 5,000 lumen laser for? He handed me 5 crisp $100 bills. He looked me dead in the eye, a new, terrifying light in his soul. The Davises, he whispered. Their wind chimes are too loud. I took the money. I watched him load the melted projector into the back of his Prius. Freedom isn't free. But watching the HOA president weaponize my own stupidity against the rest of the neighborhood, that was worth every penny.